You can hear me. I can't hear you. No. Can you hear me, Wyn?
I can hear you, Deborah. Can you hear me?
I
I fix
can't.
I fixed it
Oh, there you
now.
are. Oh, good, good, good. I was wondering if one of you might. So I found in the last session. Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I found in the last session that I needed to moderate the questions. Yeah.
How do you do that?
So so you see where it says Q&A on the right,
Yes.
and then and then at the bottom it said announce Q&A. So I can maybe if one of you maybe it's better for one of you to click on that announce
I've
Q&A to open the Q&A.
I've done that now.
And then at the top, it's mine says right now review questions, but there's a drop down menu that's
Yeah.
all questions. Yeah, and review questions. It took me a little while to figure this out. Review questions um, shows the questions in review, and then there's three dots on the right side, and if you click on that, it allows you to approve them. And then it seemed that that was what allowed everybody to see the questions.
Oh, okay. I'll look after that this time.
Okay, awesome. So we could kind of take turns on that one.
Yeah.
All right, I guess we should jump right in, right? All right, welcome everybody. We're so glad to have you here. We just came out of our first session. This is our second session of three. And my name is Deborah Baron. I'm the editor of a publication on Medium called Less Stress, More Success. And this publication is dedicated to sharing the teachings of something called the three principles. It is a psycho-spiritual understanding that takes us from our traditional teachings and learnings from a perspective of the individual and our own psychology into a more universal understanding that is more spiritual based. And what we have learned from our own experience in deepening our understanding of these principles and the work that each of us does in teaching these principles is that by going what we call upstream and before our individual psychologies, we've experienced transformation in our own lives and a freedom and a just a I don't have the word. It's just awesome. Let's just say that it's just awesome. So we're hoping that this is an invitation to all of you to dip your toes into this understanding. Um, we're going to answer as many questions today as we can. The topic for this session is how to live in less stress and how to find more productivity and quote success in your life from that space. And I also, one of the things I mentioned in the last session that I'd like to repeat is that if you do dip into this understanding and you start to learn about it and experience change in your life, I would love to have more writers on the publication. So I'd like to invite you to then write about your experiences and share them in the publication. So we're always open to new writers and to hearing new experiences of people who are learning from this understanding. Okay, so I'm the one who's going to kick off this session. Again, this is about living in less stress and finding more success as a result. And I'd like to start by sharing my own experience. I was in a pretty intense career for, about 30 plus years of my life and working my way up the corporate ladder. And very, very focused on my own impressions of what I thought success was supposed to be and what my self-image was around, things like title and prestige and whatever it was I was working towards, and wanted to be amazing. I mean, I just wanted to be the best that I could, and so I spent years trying to learn what that meant. And what happened was through lots and lots of courses and lots of things like personality profiles that were supposed to tell me who I was, I started to build up a list of what I called my shoulds. And it was, I piled them up on my shoulders, right? I should communicate this way. I should speak this way. I should dress this way. I should answer people's comments in meetings this way. I should respond in meetings this way. I should treat my colleagues a certain way. I should manage up to my boss in a certain way. And I had this pile of shoulds that I was carrying around on my shoulders all day long. And not only were they sitting there with stress, but they were in my head as conversations in my head. So my brain was full of how was I supposed to be? And I literally stumbled across this understanding in 2017, and I heard two things. First thing I heard was, you have inner wisdom. You have an inner GPS that guides you every step of the way. And all you ever need to do is take a step. And from that step, you will know the next step. And what happened to me in that moment was I realized I didn't have to carry all those shoulds around because I had it in me innately. And in that moment, literally 30 years of shoulds just fell off my shoulders. And what started to happen, like the biggest thing I remember was that I went from sitting in meetings thinking about what was I supposed to say next or how do I best respond. So instead of being fully present to a meeting, I was in my head. And I stopped having to do that because I realized that I would know what to do and I could trust it in the moment. And I became present to the people that I was working with. It was a huge stress reliever, and it was just incredibly freeing. And the second insight that I had was that I thought my environment before this understanding, before finding this understanding, I thought that my environment was creating my experiences. I thought that my past experiences were creating my experiences. And what I learned was that it was my thought process that was creating my experiences, and that I was living from the inside out, not the outside in. And when that happened, I started to take responsibility for my experiences, and I stopped having to blame the outside world. So it was no longer my colleagues that were driving me crazy. It was my thinking about my colleagues that were driving me crazy. And it did wonders for my relationship. And it was no longer my to-do list that was creating my stress. It was my thought process about my to-do list that was creating my stress. And if it was coming from me, I didn't have to believe it. So I went from being an overly stressed professional who was trying to do everything right all of the time, thinking that there was a checklist on how to do it right, that if I just learned would, create the perfect me, to trusting that I had what I needed and knowing that I didn't have to believe the thoughts to the contrary, and recognizing that by dropping all those stressful thoughts, I could become more present. And when I was more present, I was in tune with the best me, not the stressed me. I'll share one more metaphor with you, and then I'll start to answer some questions and hand it over. But we all kind of know that in sports, when you get in the zone, you perform well, right? So you practice and you have muscle memory, and all those things are really, really important. And then you're going to find your best performance by dropping your thinking and just being present to, whenever the ball comes to you or whatever, sport you're playing, right? And it's the same in business. And somehow we think that stress helps us, right? We think that the stress is sort of what propels us. And it's really, really cool to find out that no, we actually do better in the clarity. When we drop the stressful thinking, we're better at seeing the ball coming at us and being able to respond. So I'm going to stop there. I am not able to see the questions. Do we have any questions yet, Jacqueline?
We have been having a few questions. I've been answering them as we go and pointing them at different things. I don't know why you can't see them.
Oh, now I can see them. I just had to
Okay.
format it. Yeah.
And I've just been advised that I can also say that questions are answered so that you only get the ones that haven't been answered yet. But we have a couple. I just need to approve. There's one. There's one. And that was the advice. So there should be two now that I haven't answered.
Okay.
You can see that.
So the one that's striking me, how do you balance and reconcile planning for the future and being in the present? So for me, planning in the future is kind of being in the present. So how do I explain that? So it's like when I'm present, things start to occur to me. And sometimes what occurs to me is to plan. And that planning is different than anxiety. It's just kind of like if I'm going to go on a trip, I'm actually planning my summer vacation for next year, right? It makes sense to me that if I want to reserve a vacation home for next summer, that I should do it now because they fill up. And that's to me is like it's being present, but also planning for the future, which is different than always living in the future. Do either one of you have anything you want to add to that? Does that make sense?
I think that nailed it for me, Deborah, in that I can be present to planning. I can be present to preparing. So this morning, I could have really been in my head about how do I make sure that this platform that I'm not used to called Hopin works, and be worried about that from the moment I woke up a few hours ago until now, when in fact it's like, oh, okay, let me just make sure I have the links. We did our dress rehearsal 10 days ago. Okay, it does work. I'll arrive 10 minutes early just to check my video and audio. And I'm present to that, as opposed to this morning. And I'm away from home right now, staying with friends. And I thought, well, the best thing I can do this morning is have a cup of coffee and look at the ocean, not worry, and enjoy the morning and enjoy the moment while I'm here, as opposed to kind of really complicating and muddying the waters in my mind with things. But also to the bigger point, I think, and my experience of what you've shared, Deborah, would be that I thought the same that you pointed at, as I thought stress was a friend of mine. But in fact, presence and clarity is my best ally, my best, so to speak. And to the point that when I can see that stress and overwhelm and a feeling of being busy in my mind and heavy and heady in my mind doesn't come from anything outside me, as you said, Deborah, then all of a sudden, well, what can happen is that we then I have anyway, put more on my mind, because now I think I should think myself out of this and think myself out of stress and stress myself about being stressed, when in fact, when I see it, that it would naturally clear, I can put my presence away from me and put my attention on the task at hand, including planning and preparing if that's what's required, including making sure I put the right amount of coffee in the percolator compared to the amount of water. Then everything becomes far more simple, because my attention isn't on managing this. It's just on the task at hand. And I wish I'd have known that my entire life. There'd been clues all along. And while I will still fall for the trick that thought will look real, I will fall for the trick that stress might be useful. I'm not right, but I will, as a human being, continually fall for the trick of it. And that's, to me, the reason I'm smiling right now is I can see the innocence in that and the absolute lack of harm that does for me. Even though I thought that I was really harming myself by how much thinking and how much stress I was putting myself through, turns out I was wrong. Turns out I'm fine.
We have another question here. Stuck in post-traumatic syndrome, the mind gets extremely fatigued. You know, it's funny. Sometimes I feel unequipped to answer that question. I get it, you know, fairly often, and then sometimes I feel really equipped to answer that question. So I'll give it a little bit of a shot here, and then help. Hopefully, my colleagues can help out. For me, there's something really powerful about knowing that my thinking comes from me, even though it feels like it's coming from the circumstances. And you know, I told this story about how in an instant, I 30 years of shoulds fell off my shoulders. And I've had other insights like that where when I see how it's working, the experience of that thinking has gone away in an instant. And at the same time, I've had other thoughts that are really sticky. Like I'd love to not think them, but they just don't go away. And my experience with them, it's been really interesting because I like to think about having a big block of cheese. And you know how when you have a big block of cheese and you have a cheese slicer and you take a really thin slice of cheese off the top and you look at the block of cheese, it doesn't change, right? Like there's a piece gone, but it doesn't look any different. But if you keep taking slices and you keep taking slices, over time you see that the block of cheese shrinks. And so what's happened with me with some of my big thoughts that have felt really sticky is that when I start to like I don't like the feeling of having them, it occurs to me, like I don't have to do anything to remind myself. It just occurs to me, oh yeah, that's coming from me, not the thing, not the outside thing that happened or the outside influence. It's coming from me. And every time I think that, sometimes I just get like a momentary feeling of relief. And that momentary feeling of relief is like taking a slice of cheese off the block. And what I found is that over time, what I thought was an immovable block of cheese that was never going to go away is slowly shrinking and slowly shrinking. And those thoughts that I've created that felt like they were coming from my experiences have shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And some of them I still carry around, but instead of consuming me all encompassing like this, they've become something that I carry around like this that's still getting smaller and smaller and smaller over time. So when you look like you're ready to add something to that.
I wasn't. I was just really loving the metaphor. That's why I was just thinking.
Okay.
That really helped me see something again more deeply. Really good.
I'll jump in if you like, Deborah. So I've had what's known as complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a real mouthful, that is, CPTSD. I didn't know that's what I had. I just had, I just felt like my life was very difficult, and I had a number of insecure thinking and behaviors that made sense to me to try and make me feel better. And when I came across this understanding, I realized along the way, because sometimes it takes time, you get little little insights and little nudges, and for some lucky people things happen overnight, but for the rest of us, it's a gradual sinking in to a different way of feeling and being in the world. And some of those behaviors and some of those thoughts dropped overnight, and I didn't even know it until several years later. It's only just recently that somebody told me, oh, these are the symptoms of CPTSD. And when I realized that, it was actually, I felt like it was really helpful, because it explained previous behavior and previous ways of living in the world. Because what I was doing innocently was constantly reliving things that had happened, applying lessons that I felt I'd learned to now, which were, seemed appropriate, and then trying to stop things from happening in the future. So yeah, totally exhausting, Ronnie, totally exhausting. And because you're always doing a lot of past thinking, you're trying to put things in place that help you, and then you're trying to prevent things from happening. So even to me, even seeing that shows me that, wow, that's hard work. And what I feel like Deborah's been pointing to is a simpler way of dealing with that, by knowing that you're okay right now, even if a memory haunts you or an event keeps occurring to you, that actually right now in this current moment, it's not happening. And that's when I started to see a little light in the crack, because I started to realize I'm panicking about this thing that's going on in my head. I feel terrible. I feel angst. I'm getting flashbacks. I think something's going to happen right now. But actually, that's not true. Right now, in this moment, that is not happening. And that shone a little light on the fact that innocently I've been doing it to myself. And I thought it was helpful, because I thought if I keep doing that, I'll keep myself safe. But actually, the safety comes from finding your okayness right now.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh. All right, let's see. Let's find another question here. Is there any difference between a real stress in the reality and the stress that created in our thoughts? Hope you get the question. It's really interesting when I bring this understanding to people. I'm going to ask you, this might be hard. And sometimes people get really defensive. So I'm going to ask you if you could try it in the name of the potential to experience something completely new. Try to drop what you already think you know. We're really taught to live in the world of psychology. We're really taught to live in the world of our thinking. And we're really taught that our experiences create our inner experience. We're taught that our outer experiences create our inner experiences. And so what I want to say about stress is, yeah, it seems really real. It really seems like that thing in our life is creating stress. And some of the, I don't know, I guess what's occurring to me is evidence, right? Like there's two things. One is that somebody else could be in the same situation and not feel the stress. So how could it be the situation? And then to add on that, sometimes I can be in a situation and it feels really stressful. And then I can be in the same exact situation and it doesn't feel stressful. So from that space, the stress is always being created by me. And that's only helpful. It doesn't always make it go away. In fact, it often doesn't. It points me back to the spiritual nature as opposed to the psychological experience of what I'm thinking. It's it points me back to the fact that I am thinking versus into the space of what I'm thinking. I hope that helps. Do either one of you want to add to that, or should we try to get in one more question or one more question? All right, let's see. Let's see. Okay, I'm just going to go right to the top, just random. Okay, stress can be a motivator setting us into action from bad situations. Recognizing it is a trick, but a good trick. Okay, well, maybe that's just a statement, huh? Because, yeah, I agree. Do either of you have a question you want to pull out of the list?
Maybe the question on how to deal with outside stress might be a good one.
Can you read it?
How to deal with the outside stress, war, or some external factors that are not my own thoughts and made up inside my head.
Yeah.
Still keep my career and success growing.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that a lot too. Like, war's real. Yeah, there's no question about it. And then we have thoughts about it. Right? And that can be sometimes the hardest one to see because we're so we know it's awful. Right? We know it's awful. And then to be able to see that that's my thought that knows it's awful. That's my thought process that knows it's awful. That's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. I often point people to start where it's easier. Don't worry about the things that you don't get yet. Yeah, like it's really easy for me to know that when I look outside of my window on a rainy day, that I can have an opinion about it. It could be gorgeous out my window or it could be miserable, right? That's easy. So if there's an arena like war that you don't get, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just if you're curious and you think there's the potential for a new experience through this understanding, just start with what you do see.
Have you got time for one more?
Maybe.
Does our mind feed our brain, or does the brain feed our mind? Do we make decisions based on the mind feeding the brain, or the brain feeding the mind? Do we know the answer to this question, or how to use our mind and brain in unison?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try to answer this fast. My favorite example of this is Albert Einstein. Okay, so he was a brilliant intellect. He had an incredible understanding of physics, and yet he came up with a brand new understanding called the law of relativity. Right? He needed both. Right? He needed his intellect, and then he found inspiration from a brand new and unknown space. So yeah, our intellect and our deep divine wisdom, when they work together, amazing.
And we're done. It's a wrap. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And again, if your questions weren't answered, please reach out to us. And we're on again at 11:30 to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, and hope to see you then.
Starts in 30 minutes wherever we are in the world. See you there.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.